The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Sadly, we've heard the name Gene Hackman quite a bit in the last 24 hours, and the reporting on his death almost sounds like a Gene Hackman movie with Gene Hackman playing the lead detective. But a lot of conversation about one of the greatest actors who ever lived. And there was something that came out yesterday about Gene Hackman playing Coach Norman Dale in Hoosiers, that he was not actually the first choice to play that part. It was another very well-known actor, and were it not for some movie conflicts, it might have been this particular actor playing Norman Dale in the iconic sports movie. We'll get to that later this hour. Albert Breer has some more information on the Matt Stafford chase. Is he going to stay in Los Angeles? Could he wind up with the Raiders? Could he wind up with the New York Giants? There seems to be a hot market for him, even though he's under contract. The Rams have given him permission to shop for a deal, which is what the Giants did last year with Saquon Barkley. How'd that work out? Yeah, not too well. But we'll get to that later this hour. Also, Dan Quinn saying something yesterday, which I think is worth listening to, about the possibility of a sophomore slump for Jayden Daniels. What he says about that. We'll get to that shortly. But we're looking for good news these days, right? I mean, we need something to boost our spirits a little bit, right? So much negative news to talk about. And this is something that came out from Kevin Garnett yesterday, which I would love to see. After what happened, not just with the NBA All-Star Game, but with the four-nation tournament in hockey, and how much better the All-Star break was for hockey than it was for basketball. It's kind of a wake-up call for the NBA that they got to say to their fan base, yeah, we've embarrassed ourselves with these All-Star games, and whatever they came up with this year was a little bit better, but not much better. So you need something to spruce things up. And there has been some discussion of a one-on-one tournament. And Kevin Durant, who would be fabulous at this, he'd have to be one of the favorites to win it if he were to participate. I remember seeing him play in high school. He was a 6'10" guy in high school who could handle the ball like a 6-foot guard. So he would be great in something like this. And he confirmed that he would play in a proposed one-on-one tournament during the All-Star break. He was on the Draymond Green show. Baron Davis, I guess, is his sidekick. And he even listed some players that he thought would be tough competitors for him in a one-on-one tournament. Jason Tatum, Kyrie Irving, Joel Embiid, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Who wouldn't want to see that? Who wouldn't want to see Durant play against any of those guys? And he said, yeah, I mean, I could win this, but I could lose too. I've played with Jason Tatum. I've played with Kyrie and Joel Embiid. And I think he can get a bucket or two from the wing. I'm talking about straight up healthy. He's not now. Joel Embiid is not. I think Shea would be tough in the ones, especially if he got like a 5-second clock, not a 3-4 dribbles. And if you just had a shot clock, it's going to be tough. And then Anthony Edwards, there are guys that he's talking about that everybody, I think, would like to see play in a one-on-one tournament. It would be $1 million for the first prize, which is not out of line. Why not? Why not do it for $1 million? And I'll tell you something. There is history on this. You may be too young to remember this, but, I remember watching this. Back in the day when the NBA didn't have a studio show, like the NFL, and they didn't really even start the one that became so iconic, the NFL Today. That didn't even start until 1975. We would have like a 15-minute pregame for the NFL Sunday, and I don't even remember going back to the studio for scores at the half. I think sometimes you'd have to watch the marching band during a game. Yeah, I'm serious about this. So this was 1972, and the NBA was looking for something to do at halftime. You run your commercials, but a lot of times they just went back to the two announcers, and they would kind of BS about the first half and some of the stats and stuff like that, and the second half would begin. So they came up with an idea of a one-on-one tournament. These would not be live, but they would be filmed in a gym to be run at halftime of games. Kevin Greavy did this. I remember talking to him about this. Now, Greavy came along a little bit later, but they still had some one-on-one competitions. But the early ones, 72 and 73, he was in college in those days. But what they did was they had a $15,000 first prize. And believe me, that was good money then. That's when a really good NBA player was making like 40 or 50 grand a year. So $15,000 meant something. And second prize, $7,500. That was valuable. That was something that they chased, and they got the stars to participate. And it was 16 players, and over the course of the season, they'd whittle it down. They, just like a regular tournament, they would advance week to week, and then during the finals, they had the championship. And in 1972, the championship was played between a big man and a small man. So it was working. Like, one-on-one doesn't necessarily have to be quick guys who could shoot. Bob Lanier was a big, hulking center, and he could back you down. But JoJo White was fast enough to get around him. So that was the championship, Lanier versus JoJo, and Lanier won that. Year two of this, 1973, Jeff Petrie, who was Rookie of the Year when he played with the Portland Trail Blazers and had a really good NBA career, played Barry Clemens in the championship. Barry Clemens was the classic journeyman player. 11 years in the league, averaged less than 7 points a game. But with the sponsorship of Vitalis, remember Vitalis, hair tonic, don't have the greasy stuff, use Vitalis. They had the prize money, which was $15,000 for the winner, $7,500 for the losers. And I remember this. I remember being excited about this because it was a lot better than, Jack Twyman and Bill Russell or whoever was doing the color in those days talking about the first half. This was something to spruce it up. And, yeah, these guys played hard. So I'm all for this. I think this would be, if it even replaces the All-Star game, why not? They had a 10-second shot clock for this. What if you lowered it to 5 seconds? And the way the scoring was done, it was a 20-point game. You had to get 20 points, but you had to win by 4. So that would lengthen it out enough to make it, like 11 minutes or so for what they would need for halftime of a game. But, yeah, if you want to do this, Kevin Durant, if you can get these other stars to participate like Giannis and SGA and Embiid, yeah, let's do it. Let's make it happen. And if you want to look on YouTube, I'm sure you can probably find some highlights of these one-on-one games. Pete Maravich was a participant. He didn't win, obviously. But, look, basketball is the one sport where most of us grow up playing one-on-one. You can't play one-on-one baseball. You can't play one-on-one football. You can't play one-on-one hockey. You can play one-on-one tennis, but tennis matches can go forever. One-on-one basketball, that's how many of us played the game as kids. You couldn't necessarily get, 6 guys to play, so you'd play 3-on-3. You get your buddy and you play one-on-one and in a half court. And that's the basketball that most of us played, other than however far you went, whether you made it to high school or even college. But, some of us weren't nearly even good enough to try out for things like that. And, I think this would be absolutely a hit and make it happen. $1 million first prize? Sure. They got the money to do that. They'll get a sponsor to kick in on that, and that'll happen. I don't say it'll happen. I hope it happens. All right, back to the football. Yesterday, a lot of yak going on at the Combine. The drills have started. It's not a lot of interest around here this year because, the Commanders are picking 29. They may pick an offensive lineman or, a defensive back that nobody's heard of. There's no Jayden Daniels possibility this year. But it's fun now to look back on a year ago when it was fairly certain they were going to take him. And this was the first contact, actually, that Adam Peters, the newly hired GM, had with Jayden Daniels, and it was at the Combine in Indianapolis, and he reminisced a little bit yesterday with Pete Schrager of the NFL Network.
Last year at this time, so many questions about the Commanders. Jayden Daniels didn't perform. He didn't throw. He didn't do it. And yet you guys met with him here. Do you remember that interaction? Was there a feeling of this might be the guy?
Yeah, I remember it vividly. And we, at that time, we were pretty locked in on him. And cool story about him is we interviewed him really early in the morning. And it was like like 8 or something, and so that's like 5 o'clock West Coast time. So, Jayden, he's chill, he's kind of relaxed and California cool and all that. But as soon as we turned on the tape, he sat up, perked up, and you could just see his eyes light up, and you could just see how much he loved football just by that little interaction. You've
been here now a couple days, you walk around. Do people look at the Commanders a little different, you think? Do you think you're brass and you guys are walking around and there's a feeling of, okay, there's a Super Bowl contender in the house?
I don't know if we look at it like that. I think I'm really proud of what the guys accomplished this year and what DQ accomplished and what Josh has allowed us to do. And so it's really cool to have the team in the nation's capital have some success, and that's what we plan on building on. But, I don't see us any differently. We're still doing the same stuff. We're still working just as hard to find more Commanders.
Yeah, that's the way they do business. And at the news conference at the end of the season that was held jointly with Quinn and Peters, Peters made a point of saying, we went to the NFC Championship game this year, but you start over every year. Every year you start from the bottom. They've got players now that they can count on, some that they drafted, including Daniels, of course, and then some of the holdovers. They've got holes to fill. They've got some injuries to deal with, and they got 28 free agents or something like that, one of the most in the league. So the things they have to do. So it's not like, hey, yeah, we're Super Bowl contenders now. Look at us. No, they don't roll like that. Dan Quinn sitting down with a crew from CBS yesterday. This was Jonathan Jones and Pete Prisco, who's been there for quite a while. And they talked about what can happen to quarterbacks, and you might make the case that C.J. Stroud went through this last year with Houston, though the Texans did make it back to the playoffs. But that's a sophomore slump. And here's how Quinn answers the questions about the concerns that maybe Daniels will go through the sophomore slump.
I think that's probably why we don't use expectations, because we're expecting him and all the other guys to relentlessly go after it and get better, coaches included. And somewhere, I said today, I don't know where it is, but Bobby Wagner is doing things to get better. And if Wags has that attitude amongst our group, every other person in that locker room and building should feel the same. And so those are the things that we want to absolutely go after, growth and improvement. And so that's what Adam and I spent a lot of time talking about. How are we going to get better? And so Jayden at the front of that is here's the things he's going to go after to get better. And that's kind of the fun part of coaching, man. When there's a group that's I want to get better at this. And when they're coming to you with those ideas, man, that's when coaching is the best, because this is what I think, as opposed to you leading the way. You need to get better at this. You need to when they have their own investment in that, it's going to happen. And now, how do we help make that happen?
For you, the process was probably sped up a little bit. I mean, I can't imagine you went into last season thinking we were going to go as deep as we were. And now the expectations are now built around that. How do you handle that as a coach and try and level that off a little bit?
It was important being here, because last year at this time, I didn't know what I didn't know about our team. I hadn't even met them yet. And so I didn't know what a commander was. We had a picture, Adam and I did, of what we wanted it to look like. We had a vision for it, but now we got to see that and to say these are the style and the attitudes of what we want. And so that's what we want to build on. And we want to add to that crew of guys who are just absolutely not going to back off and go for it. And that'll be some returning free agents. That'll be the development of the players on the roster. And then guys that we're meeting with here. There'll be some players that we'll add on. And we don't treat the rookies, they're rookies. Our guys played important, impactful snaps. But when they walk in the door, they're not, don't worry about it, it's a rookie. We're counting on them to take the step, and the other players there know that. And so that's a cool part of our building. We're not into hazing or, that. No, man, they're here to help us win. And it's everybody's job to help all of us get on the same page together. If you walked into our building, man, last year I said, you can ask anybody. This is how we do things. This is how we get down. And so rookie, 10-year player, it's all the same. It's a matter of how quickly we can get the guys to do their thing.
Last time we saw you guys on the field, game was getting away from you against the Philadelphia Eagles. They obviously go on to win the Super Bowl in very, very convincing fashion.
Yes.
Do you compare your group to the reigning Super Bowl champs and what you are maybe lacking or needing to take that next step?
Excellent especially in the postseason, and they played fantastic. When you're hitting on all sides, that's when you're at your best. We don't make a comparison just to one group. There's so many games you have to win, and I think that's a dangerous slope to go on. If we got to get bigger in this, you'll get big, but you'll lose some speed when you have to need it. So you want to make sure we need to build a team that suits us and how we go and do things. So offensively, we play a lot of no huddle, and that's one of our edges more than anybody else, but we also need to continue to supplement that with guys that can attack, that get down the field. Same thing defensively. So fitting the style, that's the thing, and not trying to be anybody else, but be yourself, really rock solid. And but man, give them credit. Their run was excellent. I know what that can look like at the end of a postseason, and I certainly was impressed. In the Super Bowl, not only just the whole team, but the attitude, the physicality. It was rock solid.
There is an historical lesson to be learned in this, and it goes back with this same franchise, with the Redskins, back to 1987. If you remember this was the year that Jay Schrader had a great year. 1986, threw for over 4,000 yards, and they made it to the NFC Championship game. And the Redskins lost on a very windy day, and there are conspiracy theories that at the Meadowlands they opened up the back door when Washington had the ball so there'd be more wind, and they closed it when the Giants, who knows. That was the better of the two Bill Parcells Super Bowl teams. They went on and beat the hell out of the Broncos in the Super Bowl. But in that game, Washington lost 17-0. And there was a feeling after the game that Jeff Bostic had been manhandled up front by Jim Burt. The Giants at that time were one of the few teams that ran the 3-4 defense with the nose tackle. And the feeling was, Bostic's too small. Now, they didn't have free agency in those days. They didn't cut him loose. They kept him around for the next year, but they decided we need a bigger center. So they moved Russ Grimm over to center. Grimm had played center in college. And that wasn't the reason, but the team did struggle in the early part of the year, and Bostic sat on the bench confused because he had been the anchor of that offensive line that had been so successful, going to back-to-back Super Bowls and keeping them competitive with, John Riggins or whoever happened to be running the ball. In this case, it would be, I guess it was maybe George Rogers by that time. And the chemistry of the offensive line was important, and Grimm was a guard. Moving him to center meant you had to make some other changes. And what they ultimately found out was, we're better off with Bostic at center. They went back to that, and they won the Super Bowl the next year. So the question about reacting to what Philadelphia did to them is not something that's going to really happen. They're going to react to how they build the best roster and the other teams that they have to play, besides the two against the Eagles and the possibility of another meeting in a playoff game or maybe even an NFC championship. So that's a lesson learned, and that's a historical lesson that Dan Quinn can pretty much look up. In fact, all he has to do is walk across the hall and talk to Doug Williams, who was the quarterback on that team, which had Jeff Bostic back at center when Williams had that historic Super Bowl with the 4 touchdown passes in the second quarter against Denver. So there you go. That was Dan Quinn yesterday with CBS. Coming up, Albert Breer of the SI.com talking to Dan Patrick yesterday about what's going on with Matt Stafford. It's a very curious situation. It would seem that a team that was a couple of plays away from getting to the NFC Championship game would want their starting quarterback back. But it doesn't seem to be playing out that way. So we'll get to that. Plus, the latest on Myles Garrett, who probably is still on the radar for the Commanders. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We don't take calls here, but there seems to be a lot of outrage in sports radio world around town about this. I guess it's it's a report, but it's like it's been in the wind for a while. It's not like Erick Flack of Channel 9 uncovered this. It's just sort of common sense here. If the Commanders work out a deal to build a stadium on the RFK site, there's not going to be these wide open parking lots to have tailgating. You may, if you want to do this, and the stadium does wind up there, you'll have to be kind of creative with how you do it. But this is not, a unique situation. I was in Atlanta, not last season, but the season before, and my son and I went to a game there. That stadium is smack downtown, and there isn't any room for tailgating there. I think it's a trade-off because you got a lot of bars and restaurants around the stadium. Same thing in New Orleans. I mean, has anybody been screaming about New Orleans not having any tailgating? That stadium's been around since the 1970s. It's the way things are when you build a downtown stadium. So you're hearing incredible things like, well, if we can't have tailgating, we might as well stay in Landover. No. You don't want to do that. See, this nostalgia about RFK and all the tailgating that went on. Yes, there was tailgating in the parking lots. There was some. Not as widespread as it is now at Northwest Stadium. There wasn't as much room for that. There weren't as many people either because that stadium sat 55,000, although they've shrunk Northwest now to, about 63. But all this hand-wringing, we don't have our tailgating anymore. That's the way it goes. The Ravens, they have some parking lots there, and there's tailgating, and they have the advantage of sharing that parking lot with the baseball stadium, so you can spread out a little bit. But that's kind of a unique downtown situation. And let's face it, downtown Baltimore is not the same as downtown Washington. Just isn't enough room for it. So if you're ready to get in a snit about this and say, forget it, forget RFK, we'll just stay where you are, fine. You can have that feeling. But remember this, RFK was made up of people who went to games in a large group, or many people, I should say, went by way of Metro. You think those people were on the Metro with their hibachis, getting ready to tailgate? No, they were going from the Metro into the stadium. And this is what you would have once again as that Metro stop would be revived for football games at RFK Stadium. And, yes, you could lose out on some tailgating, though you could do it creatively. There are places around there. Now, one of the things in the Erick Flack report, which we'll get to at 10 o'clock, is that people in the neighborhoods around RFK are concerned because if there's no place to tailgate around the stadium, they'll just prop their grills up, on the sidewalk in front of their house and spread trash and all that stuff. Okay, that's a concern. But that whole area may be changed as well. That's all part of the revitalization program. So, I think you can creatively tailgate if you don't have the wide open parking lots. Look, there was some discussion years ago about building a stadium for the Giants and Jets in Manhattan. You think you're going to have tailgating there? Yeah, you can have it there in Jersey. That's fine. Like Ed Koch once said, when the Giants, based in a stadium in New Jersey, won the Super Bowl, he said, let them have their parade in Moonachie, And so they have a stadium that's in Jersey, and they have a lot of room in the parking lots, and people can tailgate. If they ever decided to build in Manhattan, tailgating goes away. There are trade-offs in this. And, if that's your thing, if you like to set up your barbecue grill and have your buddies with beer and friends, that's great. That's all part of the great experience. But I would say it's a relatively small percentage of the people that go into the football game. I'll bet, I'm just making this up off the top of my head, I'm guessing 15% of the people who go into the game tailgate before it. I can't imagine it's much more than that. I really can't. And a lot of people just, want to get in. They want to get into the game, want to get in their seats, maybe get some food early, maybe watch some of the warm-ups, So there is a group that wants to tailgate. Maybe they can figure out a space where they can meet and do that, which is walking distance of the stadium. Maybe they can get that done. All right. You know what else they could do? Here's something else they could do. There's supposed to be some parkland around there. What if this was an opportunity for food trucks? To set up right around there and maybe get some picnic tables and things like that. You can work these things out. So stop freaking out. Oh, they're taking away our tailgating. Relax. You don't want the stadium in Landover. You want the stadium in D.C. Let them work it out. All right. It wasn't that long ago where this football team, whatever name they would have been, the Redskins, Washington football team, Commanders, they would have been looking at the Matt Stafford situation and saying, let's get him here. Not that he'd ever want to come here under the Dan Snyder ownership, but that's where this franchise was at one point. Russell Wilson's on the market. Let's try to get him. Let's see what we can do. No, Russell Wilson's not coming here. And so Matt Stafford is in that spot now with Jayden Daniels. There'd be obviously no interest in making a deal for him, but teams are looking at what's going on with the Rams. Very curious situation in that the team was really good this year, very close to being in the NFC Championship game and hosting it against the Commanders. And then now Matt Stafford suddenly is too expensive for him, even though at 36, he still seems to have something left. This was Albert Breer of SI.com on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday with the circumstance that the Rams are facing with Stafford, while other teams like reportedly the Raiders and the Giants are looking at the possibility of bringing him in.
That is, and you may be familiar with the place, but that's a pretty high-end club.
Hold on, let me start this over again because I didn't set that up right. This is about the meeting that took place between Tom Brady and Matt Stafford at a high-end ski resort, that they just happened to bump into each other, not anything planned. Now, it's not tampering because the Rams have given Stafford an opportunity to shop around. So take two on this. Albert Breer on Tom Brady and Matt Stafford running into each other.
That is, and you may be familiar with the place, but that's a pretty high-end club in Montana that people on that level of celebrity are at and spend time at. And so the idea that they would unintentionally run into each other is not far-fetched. I don't know exactly how that happened. I don't think that I don't know for sure. I haven't dug into it quite as much yet, but I don't think, I don't know that Brady invited Matthew Stafford there. Matthew Stafford, I know, had been there in the past. And so, again, not that unusual that it would happen, but I do think it shows how Brady is really a part of what the Raiders are doing now. And Brady, is an integral part of their interview process of convincing head coaching and general manager candidates that it was a better job than it has been in recent years, and that and then ultimately, they wind up hiring two guys that Brady's got a relationship with. Pete Carroll, of course, who he competed against for all those years, and John Spytek, who he became pretty close with over the 3 years they spent together in Tampa. So I think the Raiders are serious, a serious suitor for Matthew Stafford.
But this wasn't tampering, that if Brady didn't invite him.
Stafford has permission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Stafford had permission. Now, Stafford's had permission, Dan, for over 3 weeks now. Like, Stafford got permission to speak with other teams starting during Super Bowl week. So I believe it's either right at 3 weeks or just over 3 weeks that he's had permission to go out and speak to other teams.
What is the market for Matthew Stafford?
More than the Rams want to pay right now, I think, is the best way to describe that. For those who don't know, he's on the books for $27 million in cash in 2025. And that number was lowered by $4 million because they borrowed that $4 million and another $1 million from 2026 to give him a $5 million raise in 2024, which isn't a raise at all if you're just borrowing from 1 year and giving it and putting it in another, which is why I think everybody knew when they made that contract adjustment after a really tough 6-month negotiation that they were going to be back at the table again. And the way Stafford's looking at it is the quarterback market has materially changed. There are 9 quarterbacks making over $50 million a year. And his deal at $40 million per is 50% below the top of the market, which is Dak Prescott at $60 million. So the Rams basically said to Matthew, all right, if you go out and see what the market is and go out and see what you can get. And I don't think they use the word trade specifically with him, But once you kind of let him out of the building and let him go do that, go and see his worth, there's some risk involved. And the risk is that the way he sees his worth is going to be matched with the way other teams see his worth, even at 37 years old. And that's what happened. Matthew found teams, plural, that were willing to go to a number that was commensurate with where the market is at the position. And so how do you put that toothpaste back in the tube now if you're the Rams, who, I mean, McVay still really likes Matthew. It's a good relationship. Matthew really likes living in Southern California, but the reality is they told him he was worth, they felt like he was worth X. He felt like he was worth Y. Then he goes to the market and proves he's worth Y. So now how do you reel that all back in if you're the team? It's not an easy thing to do.
The Rams, wouldn't they learn from what happened with Saquon Barkley with the Giants, where you say, go out there, see if anybody wants to pay you that kind of money? Oh, wait a minute. Wait, you're leaving? Yeah. Granted, Stafford is 36, 37 years of age, but it feels – but I'm always interested curious when I hear an analyst go, he wants to go to a place where he can win. Well, the Rams, that's a team that can win now. And they did win now, and they almost went to the NFC title game. You got Puka, you got a great young defense. You got Puka Nacua. You got Williams as your running back. I don't know. Just feels like pay him the money if you want to try to make another run at the Super Bowl. Give him 2 years, $100 million.
I agree, but I think part of this is timelines too, right? Like, does the Rams' timeline match up with Matthew Stafford's? Which Matthew Stafford's timeline is to win right now. And to go all in right now to win right now. And
you don't think the Rams' timeline is to win right now?
Well, but here, okay. So like, let's say you're the Rams, and Matthew Stafford is going year to year now, and you've dealt with this. You've had a really difficult negotiation. Now do you want to? You're in this spot where you're being asked to set another contractual precedent that maybe could be a problem for you down the line, and you're looking out at the market and you're saying, well, can we get Aaron Rodgers for a lot less than that and bring back the assets that would come in a Matthew Stafford deal? I mean, I know McVay really likes Jimmy Garoppolo. That's going to sound crazy to some people, but I think he believes he can win with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think for the Rams, part of this is our timeline may not match up completely with Matthew's timeline. We've got a team here that we think can win for the next 5 or 6 years. We're going to have a lot of big contracts coming down the pike. And, if we're in a year-to-year situation with Matthew Stafford, that's a pretty tough place to be based on what we might need to spend to keep him. And so that's when you start to look at some of the alternatives. Like, again, would it be Aaron Rodgers on a cheaper deal? Now you got more cash to spend this offseason to surround Aaron Rodgers. And then you get the assets, whether it's a first-round pick, second-round pick, whatever it is, you got the assets coming back to use too. So it's interesting from that perspective. And, I mean, think about, like, if the Giants were to get him, now you got Andrew Thomas coming back at left tackle. You have Malik Neighbors as your number one receiver. You have Tracy coming back as a young back. Maybe Cooper Kupp winds up there. Maybe Travis Hunter winds up there. Like, that team, I think, could become a contender pretty fast.
So if you listen to that, this is my takeaway as a fan of the local football team. Whew, man, have any of that stuff here. And this is why these next couple of years are going to be so crucial for this team, because you have this incredible advantage of a franchise quarterback on a rookie deal. This is gold, Jerry. This is gold. You can't do any better than this, because in a few years, Jayden Daniels is going to be chewing up a significant portion of your salary cap. And this is why the Rams are looking to move on. Now, they've spent a number of years, even going back to their Super Bowl year, of going for it, like mortgaging the future to plow money into big contracts to keep you at the top of the game, which worked out for them. Aaron Donald retiring, maybe that's, freed up money and things like that. But the reality is you can't keep doing this. This goes back to George Allen. They didn't have a salary cap, but when you keep giving up draft picks to get veterans, eventually the veterans get too old and you don't have draft picks to replace them. And here, because of this great advantage of Jayden Daniels, this is why you have to go for it, and this is why you seriously have to think about doing whatever it takes to get Myles Garrett. The latest for Garrett, Cleveland is saying they're not trading him. He's saying he wants to play for another team, but he's not being a jerk about it. You know, he's allowing for the possibility he may have to go back to Cleveland, but he did say he's not open, or according to reports, I should say, that he has slammed the door on negotiations on a contract extension. He's 29 years old. He has 2 years left on a 5-year, $125 million extension that he signed in 2020. It has no guaranteed money. They'd like to give him a contract extension. They do want him to stay, but he wants to go someplace else. Since there's no guaranteed money on this, this is not a big deal for a team that wants to pick him up, and they would give him a contract extension. That would be part of the deal. So as we move forward, this is looking very intriguing. And of course, if you're the Browns, you're going to say you're not going to negotiate to make a deal for him. That just increases your leverage. You get the price up. But it does seem like there's not a future between Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns, and eventually it will end with a trade. And from what the insiders are saying, just keep an eye on what happens in the draft. We're a little less than 2 months out, but more than likely it'll be a draft day deal. That seems to be where this is going. Teams will understand who's on the board when they are in their position, or who's on the board in the Cleveland spot, and that's probably when a deal would take place. But it does look like things are over in Cleveland, and not surprisingly, he slammed the door shut on contract negotiations. He's not going to work out a long-term deal. It's just not going to happen there in Cleveland. Coming up in the next hour, all this yak about no tailgating at the new stadium, overtime rules being discussed in the NFL, the spotting of the football, a lot of things to get to. A little baseball will mix in, and 42 years ago today, the final episode of MASH. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Where have you gone, network television? Like dinosaurs once roaming the earth, seems to be gone. But 42 years ago today, over 120 million people watched what was called a sitcom, but it was really more than that. Final episode of MASH aired. We'll look back on that. Coming up, Buster Olney with some baseball stuff, including, while the owners are crying about a salary cap, there are some owners who don't want it. He explains that. Also, Max Scherzer kvetching about the robo-ump. Buster's got thoughts on that and a whole lot more as we roll towards 11 o'clock and what will be the weekend for me. Right? How many people start their weekend at 11 o'clock in the morning? Well, I do. It's just the way the schedule works out. Let's get going with this. I spent some time on this in the last half hour. If you turn on sports radio in this town, chances are today, and I'm sure they did this yesterday, there was a lot of carping about RFK Stadium, the RFK site. It won't be called RFK, but the site will not have the room for tailgating. It's going to be, it's not exactly downtown. It's not in the middle of, K Street or anything like that. But because of the way the plans are and the amount of space, what you have every Sunday at now Northwest Stadium will not exactly work that way at the new stadium, if in fact this deal gets done. It's going to be more like, and I've been to Atlanta, there's not room for this in Atlanta. There's some people who can do it. There's a couple of lots you can make this happen, but that's downtown. That's downtown Atlanta. Minnesota, I'm told, is like this. New Orleans is like this. It's just, a trade-off that you have to make. And this got some traction yesterday when Erick Flack, who's been great about, he's been ahead of everybody in covering the developments with the stadium and everything. He spent a lot of time with people, got a lot of contacts. His reporting is terrific on this. This is what he reported regarding what will happen to tailgating if this deal is made.
Prince George's County property records show there's almost 144 acres to spread out and cook out on game dates outside the current stadium. but the math for that kind of atmosphere at an RFK site doesn't add up. Remember, the RFK campus is 174 acres, but after preserving 52 acres for recreation, which is required by the legislation passed by Congress, and the 20 to 25 acres needed for the stadium itself, only roughly 100 acres are left for other things, and the mayor has said much of that will be earmarked for housing and retail. At a community meeting at Eastern High School earlier in February, Bowser did not provide specifics on the amount of parking planned, but she did signal a shift away from those traditional tailgating lots of old.
Your question was around, would it be surface parking or garages? We would want to use garages because we will want to maximize the space.
So there you go. It's a fact of life. It's not something that you necessarily had to have a report from a TV station about. It's common sense. You look at the amount of land. I'm hearing things like, oh, this could be a deal breaker. It shouldn't be a deal breaker. It shouldn't. And there was tailgating at RFK before games. I remember seeing it. There were people out there, but you also had the great advantage of hopping off the subway and walking around the corner and getting to the stadium. If, in fact, and I hope it doesn't come to this, but it could, if it comes to rebuilding at the current site in Landover, it's still going to be about a 15-minute walk from the Morgan Boulevard Metro, I'm told, to the stadium. Wouldn't be like you come up off the escalator and you see RFK behind you. It's not that close. And I think that's one great advantage over what we have now. And the underground parking, that'll be for people who want to use that, who don't want to take Metro. I'm sure it'll be costly. And because of the space limitations, it's the way it is. Just figure it out. I do know this, that the way it's set up now, I don't know how they would reconfigure the streets, but what if you had like food trucks, lined up on game day? And yeah, it would cut down on your ability to barbecue and all that. And a lot of people like that. I understand that. But I'm looking at the percentages. I may be way off on this because I haven't done any studies on this, but I got to think that now this stadium is supposed to seat about 60,000 people, from what I understand. Of the 60,000 people that will be going to the games, I am guessing roughly 15%, maybe as much as 20%, but that would be high. 12,000 people tailgate before a game now. Is it that many? Probably not. So that would be something you give up. And the trade-off would be, and I saw this in Atlanta, it's been this way in New Orleans forever, plenty of bars and restaurants around the stadium. You're tailgating with a limited number of people anyway. It's not like, some people have big ones, so they might have 30 people. But most of these tailgates that I see, it's, 5 or 6 people. Okay, just do it inside of a bar. Or if it's a nice day on a patio of a bar or restaurant, there are going to be plenty of them around the stadium. That's part of the deal. That's why they had to rezone the land so that they can have commercial there. So I just say, get over this. This hand-wringing, I can't barbecue my hot dogs outside. Get over it. Figure it out. And if you really want to do that, you'll be able to do it. You'll be able to figure that out. But the masses of people who want to take public transportation and won't have the full advantage of that at the current site if they build there, it's not happening in Virginia, by the way, so blow that off. So it's either going to happen where they are or in the district. And I think with the ownership that they have and the track record of the people who are in the ownership group, with Josh Harris and Mitch Rales, they will find a way to get this done. They're really, really smart business people. It will get done, and people will have to change some of the way they tailgate, but it should not be a deal breaker to build the stadium on the RFK site. Rule changes. I'm really not happy about this, but it seems to be moving in the direction of overtime so that it will work the way it did in like the Super Bowl 2 years ago when Kansas City and San Francisco went to overtime, and the 49ers made a mistake. They won the toss in overtime, and they elected to receive. And so they kicked the field goal. That gave the Chiefs
exactly what they needed to do. They knew they needed to score a touchdown. They did. They won the game. In this case now, where you have the rules that they want to institute now for the postseason of each team having a chance to touch the ball, even if the receiving team off the flip scores a touchdown, it's going to change your strategy some. But that seems to be in the works. Tony and Mike taking a swing at it yesterday on PTI.
Back in 2011, the league replaced sudden death with a system in which both teams take a turn on offense unless a touchdown is scored on the first possession. Well, it turns out that the team that wins the coin flip wins the game even more often under this amended system. In the playoffs, both teams are guaranteed a possession. So just reconsidering the regular season system, Tony, makes sense to you?
Stay with me. I'm going to give you a bunch of numbers here, okay? From 2001 to 2011, that's 10 years. The percentage of teams that won it on the first possession was 55.4%. Then in 2011, they changed the rule to reflect what you just said. You can't win it on a field goal. Okay, you got to drive the length of the field. You got to do a touchdown. And so after that, from 2017 through 2024, that's 8 full seasons.
Yeah.
The team that wins when they get the ball first went up to 56.8%. Like, we're talking about 1.4%.
Right.
That seems much more random than scientific to me.
Yeah.
If you told me it went up 15%, I would have said, okay, change the rule. But I don't think 1.4% makes that compelling at all. I mean, last year, 16 overtime games, only 6 went to the team that got the ball first. That's only 38%. So I don't think you have to do it.
So it's more than random. It's insignificant. They're being a nuisance. And I'm going to go off here in a reason I'm sure you don't consider. The NFL just wants to be in your thoughts every day. They want to be on all these programs every day.
Yes.
They're a nuisance just like every other professional sport. They want to dominate your time and be inside your head and be on every show starting with Get Up at 8 o'clock Eastern time. That's what the NFL wants.
They're in your head.
That number is damn insignificant.
What I thought.
And so I pay no attention to nonsense like this.
Let me just say this.
Nonsense.
Is it fair that both teams get a possession in the regular season like they are guaranteed in the playoffs? Yes, it's fair.
It is.
But is it compelling enough? No. Because I would say, and you would say the same thing, and I know you will agree with me, we'll go old school. Should you be rewarded because your defense allowed the team to go 80 yards and score a touchdown? Should you be bailed out because of your lousy defense? No. And the answer is no.
No.
The answer is no.
But Tony, the fact that they're going to make all this big deal over that statistical measure.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Don't you get you resentful of that?
No, you know what I do? What? I admire a business that knows what it's doing.
You know, they're doing great in the money, but I'm with both of them on the small percentage of teams that win the flip, winning the game in overtime. 1%. Who cares about that? And the other thing about the kickoff, now the kickoff rules have changed so that the ball now, even if you don't kick it out of the end zone and get the touchback, it's coming back to the 30. And now there's discussion about bringing it back to the 35 on a touchback. So you're getting the ball off the flip in probably much better field position than you used to. Remember the days of overtime when if you kick the ball out of the end zone, the other team got it on the 20. Now you get it on the 30. And it would be on the 35 if they make these kickoff rule changes. So it's easy to score. And then a couple of years, this is how they're talking out of both sides of their mouth, too. A couple of years ago, they changed it so that the overtime is 10 minutes instead of 15. Well, with this, each team getting a chance, even the other team scores a touchdown, now you got to lengthen it again to 15 minutes. Well, whatever happened to making it 10 minutes to make it safer? So I tend to agree with Wilbon a little bit there, too, that, they just want to be in your head. They want to be constantly talked about, and they do a good job of that, to be honest. Here's another thing, and this is about how they're going to spot the ball with the electronics, the eye in the sky, or what it's called. Dean Blandino, who's a rules guru, he's on Fox, and was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday explaining how this new ball spotting idea is supposed to work.
So I think short term, what the league is going to do, I think for the regular season in 2025, is the officials will still spot the football, but instead of bringing out the chain gang, they're going to use this optic tracking and these cameras that are positioned around the stadium to tell you exactly where the ball is in relation to the line of gain. So instead of stretching out the chains, you'll have this graphic pop up and it'll say the ball is 6 inches short or the ball made the line of gain. I think that's the short term. Long term, I think we're going to use some of this tracking technology where they'll eventually be able to use that tech to actually spot the football, to say, here's where the ball was when the knee was down or when the runner's progress was stopped. I don't think we're going to be there in the next 2 to 3 years, but I think eventually we may see that at some point.
Well, I think we all love when the chain gang comes out. So
I do.
I
love it.
I think they got this reversed. They should be trying to spot the football. It is so random at times, and it's unscientific. And the chain gang, these are just guys holding the chain. We want them coming out. You stretch out the chain, that's good TV, Dean.
I love it. I agree with you 100% in that, the chain, it's dramatic, right? It's that how you watch the game and is it going to be a first down? And then we've got these guys that run out and this is their moment in the sun. I love the chain gang. But I don't think the technology, like I said, is there yet to spot the football. But I guess we don't, there's not a lot of chain gang enthusiasts at the league office.
Yeah, well, here's something else. Instead of Gene Steratore putting an index card to show you how close it is, use the chain gang. Sometimes it's really obvious, like a team has made a first down by half a yard. So no big deal. But if it's that close, I think Dan's right. Use the electronic spotting as a backup to get it to get the measurement closer. I think that makes sense. The other thing is about, and hopefully we can soon stop talking about this, but the tush push has certainly dominated the week. Well, what to do about it? The latest is that the owners are going to talk about it at their meetings next week, possibly doing away with it. And for those of us who've been watching football for a long time, we remember the days where there was a rule that you couldn't assist the runner. It seemed to exist in football for 50 years. What happened to it? Why did it go away in 2006 when it seemed to be an accepted part of the game that if you pushed a runner from behind, it would be a penalty? Blandino with a very, very wild explanation, I'm sure it's true, as to why that rule of assisting the runner was taken away.
That rule had been on the books forever. And it was illegal to aid the runner, assist the runner, and push. And the officials just didn't call it. They just didn't. They felt it was difficult. We just didn't see flags. So they felt, okay, if we have a rule in the book that isn't being officiated, let's take it out. Now, it took however many years for this tush push to really gain traction, but it was illegal forever prior to 2006, and I think it would be an easy fix. I think there's a safety element to it. I know the league came out and said there's no injury data on the play, but look at the Super Bowl. I mean, Chris Jones was banged up on the play. You've had several Eagles offensive linemen have said it's a tough play to execute. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes, but I'm just not sure why we keep it in.
Yeah, it would be like, oh, yeah, holding's difficult to call, so we're just going to take it out. And then teams would start hiring people who were like great wrestlers, and they would be able to drag people down to the ground. I mean, maybe that's an extreme, but just because it was difficult to call, they got rid of it? Yes, but it was a rule that was put in place because they wanted football to look different than rugby. And now we have a game that's closer than ever to rugby. So I don't see an issue with going back to you can't assist the runner. And that would be simple. I would get rid of it. I would. But there seems to be a lot of support. And, of course, Nick Sirianni and those who are involved with the Eagles are going to make a big stink about this, and they're not going to want this to go away. So we'll see where it goes. We'll see how much influence the Eagles have when the owners get together with their meetings next month. Coming up, learned this yesterday. as great as Gene Hackman was in Hoosiers, maybe the greatest sports movie ever made, he was not the first choice, apparently, to play the part. The director was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, and he explained how Gene Hackman as Norman Dale almost didn't happen.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
42 years ago today, the final episode of MASH aired, a 2.5-hour show, which had blockbuster numbers. More people watched that episode than had watched the Redskins beat the Dolphins in the Super Bowl a month earlier. We'll look back on that in about an hour. We're spending a lot of time last day or so thinking about and talking about Gene Hackman, one of the great actors who ever lived. Horrible story. He and his wife found dead in their home in Santa Fe, New Mexico, trying to figure out what happened. They did not initially suspect foul play. They're now calling it suspicious. In case you're not up to the latest on this, her body was found in one room with some pills around it. The wife, 65 years old. She was 30 years younger. And Gene Hackman's body was found in what they called the mud room with his cane and his sunglasses nearby. And investigators are trying to figure out what happened here. They had 3 dogs. 2 of them were still alive. And apparently nobody had been in the house for a couple of weeks. So we don't know whether the dog that passed away starved or had some of the pills, whatever. But that was the tragedy that was found a couple of days ago in New Mexico. And wait to see how things unfold in terms of the investigation. But what Gene Hackman did in 1986 will stand the test of time as, I guess, at least in the discussion, as the greatest sports movie ever made. It's my favorite sports movie. And it's about the small town team from Indiana that played in what they used to have. It was an all-comers basketball tournament. Didn't matter the size or classification of your school. Like, for example, we have small high schools around here, and they play in their classification. Like I think they have 1A, 2A, and 3A or something like that. So the schools with the smaller enrollment compete against the schools that also have small enrollments. That was not the case for many years in Indiana, and it was based on a team that did win. I believe it was 1952, if I'm not mistaken, and they set this in a fictional town called Milan in 1954, and that was the team that the Hoosiers, they called them, that won the championship. And there are many iconic scenes. I could have pulled a bunch of them, but this is Gene Hackman in a very famous scene as Coach Norman Dale. It's down to the last play of the championship game. They're playing the big school from Indianapolis. A lot of people believe that the top player on the Indianapolis team was based on Oscar Robertson, though it was not Oscar Robertson in the movie, but Oscar did win a couple of championships when he was playing at Indiana. But this comes down to the final possession, and Milan's got the ball, and this is Coach Norman Dale with the timeout, with his players, including star player Jimmy Chitwood, looking at him in the huddle.
All right, listen up. Here's what we're going to do. Jimmy, they're going to be expecting you to take the last shot. We're going to use you as a decoy. Buddy, you get the ball, give it to Merle on the picket fence. He's going to take the last shot. All right, let's go. What's the matter with you guys? What's the matter with you?
I'll make it.
All right. Buddy, get the ball to Jimmy, top the key. Rustin, spread the floor. Let's go.
And you know what happens. Of course, Jimmy Chitwood sinks the final shot. I did interview Bobby Plump, the real-life person who Jimmy Chitwood was based on, and he said that was the only part of the movie that was true, making the shot, although in the timeout he was not supposed to be used as a decoy. He was told to take the shot. He took the shot. He made the shot, and they live on in infamy. But this is an interesting thing that you may not have known. Gene Hackman, as great as he was in that part, was not necessarily the first choice to play it. David Anspaugh directed the movie, and the movie was written by Angelo Pizzo. Both of them were from Indiana, and Anspaugh went to IU. And he was on with Susie Schuster yesterday, filling in for her husband, Rich Eisen, on the Rich Eisen Show. And he explained that as great as Hackman was, he had real second thoughts about being in this movie, and said to one of his co-stars, I hope you've saved your money because this may be the end of our careers.
Well, he said that to Dennis Hopper. I hope you've invested well because we'll never work after this film. You know, I think that there's a scene that's missing from the film that hopefully we'll be able to cut in later, where he says to Barbara Hershey, he said, you know, when I first drove into this town, I said to myself, what the hell am I doing here? I think that's what he thought pretty much after he arrived in Indiana, for real. Because I remember one day, it was early, it could have been the first day or the second day on the set. We're in the downtown Hickory, and the guys are sitting in front of the barbershop and all that. And he looks at me and Angelo and he goes, you know, I feel like I'm getting ready to start shooting an episode of Andy of Mayberry, you know? And I think if I was, you know, Clint Eastwood or Woody Allen or some of the older directors that really had a track record, he wouldn't have disrespected us like that. But it was my first feature film, and you're talking about one of the great actors of our time. He probably was a little nervous that, what the hell was he thinking getting into this thing? And I hadn't proven myself in the feature world. So, and most of the actors besides himself and Barbara were all local hires or out of Chicago.
And unknown actors, and a lot of the basketball players too, who were just basketball players.
That's right. They had never acted a day in their lives, you know? And which I love about the film too. I mean, it was a real gamble. And Angelo Pizzo, who wrote the beautiful script, on purpose, tried to write as little as he possibly could for the kids to say, so that we could get the best ball players that we could find and hopefully in the short time turn them into actors, and which Gene helped me in that respect. We had a few acting classes with the kids, and he was very active in that.
Was he your first choice for the role?
Well, he wasn't, because I had a relationship with Jack Nicholson, and I sent the script to him to get some feedback, because he had already written and directed a movie called Drive, he said, about UCLA basketball. And I wanted to get his feelings, you know, about what he felt this Hoosiers thing might be. And I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks went by, and finally the phone rang, and it was Jack, and he said, this is the guy. That's what he says, that's the guy. I said, what are you talking about? He said, no, the guy in the script, Hoosiers. He said, I want to play that part. And so people got excited. And, you know, word got out. But the problem was Jack was involved in a lawsuit with MGM. He was going to do a movie with Tim Hutton and Cher. And I can't remember the title of it now, but it was like something like The Last Roundup or something. It was a great script. I can't believe the movie was never made. But Sandy Bressler, his manager, had called me and said, look, you know, Jack loves this. If you're not successful this fall, because we know you want to go this fall, he said, why don't you call us back and we'll revisit it. But somebody got the script to Gene.
Yeah, and the rest is history. And I just think about Jack Nicholson playing Norman Dale. And as great an actor as Nicholson is, as much understanding as he has about basketball, how many millions has he invested over the years in courtside seats to the Lakers, Jack Nicholson tends to play Jack Nicholson. And Gene Hackman was able to morph into whatever character he was playing. And he was such a perfect choice for that. And it's just so fortunate that it worked out that way. Not that Jack Nicholson would have been bad, but you just, would think of, you can't handle the truth. Or maybe that movie came out later. I don't know. But, 5 Easy Pieces or any of the other movies, he always seems to play, not that he's in any way a lesser actor, he just seems to play a certain type and just really wouldn't have been a good fit with that. You know what the part he could have played? He could have played the part that Dennis Hopper played, Shooter. But the thing is that Dennis Hopper played the character as well as anybody could. He was great in that because he's a little nuts anyway, but he produced the movie, so he wasn't going to give up that spot. And by the way, I mixed things up. I think I said it was the fictional town of Milan. No, Milan was the name of the team that actually won. The team was Hickory, Indiana, which sounded better than Milan for this part. So I know the movie. Well, I don't know why I mixed that up, but that's what happened. Man, how about that Jack Nicholson could have possibly played Coach Norman Dale, but thank God Gene Hackman did. Anyway, that's a wrap for me. Hopefully my voice will clear up a little bit over the weekend. Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you Monday morning at 9 a.m.